I will open this podcast the same way that I did the last time I had this guy on. I don't think it would be wise for me to scroll on TikTok all day, every day. You can get lost in doom scrolling. But eventually, if you doom scroll enough, you will come across Baxate Carter, and everything that he posts is super valuable. So I had to have him back on the show. Welcome, man.
Thank you so much for having me on again. I had an absolute pleasure the first time around, and it's an honor that you wanted to hear me yap a little bit more. So I appreciate you, inviting me back, and I'm excited to talk today.
Let's go, man. Well, I can't not begin by saying that Andrew Huberman shout out. Are you kidding me? Can you tell me what in the world happened? How did that come to be?
Yeah. So, for those who don't have a lot of context, recently my Instagram has actually been doing really well because of a couple little domino effects, and one of them being that, Dr. Huberman ended up shouting me out in a live. And honestly, the live itself had a decent amount of traction. But I posted a video of me just saying, "Hey, this really cool thing happened to me," just kind of sharing behind the curtains of my life as I do. And that video itself has like over 1.2 or 1.3 million views now. And so I do have somewhat of a connection to Dr. Huberman now through my personal life, which I won't be sharing super publicly for privacy of the people involved. But it's really cool to basically start growing that network even more. The other thing that happened, which obviously, Dr. Huberman following you and shouting you out is amazing. The one that I think my friends arguably cared about more is I ended up getting followed by C-Bum, Chris Bumstead, Mr. Olympia.
No way.
Yeah. And so essentially, it was a lot of, sometimes when you're doing social media, it can feel like drudge work, especially posting day after day. And sometimes, not that you should care about the numbers, but sometimes things are a little bit slower. And not to say that you should always chase the high highs, but it's important to note when they're happening and be like, okay, this is a validating moment. If Chris Bumstead and Dr. Huberman are liking what I'm posting, then clearly I'm probably onto something here, and just continuing with that.
Yeah, man. Well, that's awesome. So I was telling you before, you got to get a workout in with Huberman, but now you got to get a real workout in with C-Bum. How would that be?
Oh my God. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to think. If I were to leverage those, now mutuals, what's the best way to do it in a way that doesn't seem like you're asking for too much, or in a way that comes off as cringy? I don't want to be the full on fanboy. So I'll keep that one in the back pocket until I figure it out.
Hey, well, that's, on a smaller scale, that's what your boy Hampton's trying to do with you, man. I don't want to be the cringe, but you've always been super kind to come on, and I just wanted to have you on again so quickly just because of who you are, but because of a really big life change and career change that you recently made. So this is interesting. Some stats for you here. I've done like over 100 podcast episodes, and the first podcast I ever did is like by far the most listened to. And I think that's just because people oftentimes like scroll back to the first one and listen to the first guest. The second is yours. And that's probably because you posted about it, and a lot of people may know your name at this point, but also think that the title itself, is going to catch some eyes because I'm saying making 150, whatever, how many $1,000 right out of graduation. So of course everyone's like, "Ooh, I got to click on that." But the title of this one is probably going to be something along the lines of making that much money upon graduation and then leaving that job to make far less money. So why don't you pick up the story where I just said it? What in the world has gone on in your life over the last couple of months?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would honestly say that the thing that sort of kicked this off, me deciding to leave my job, was my own podcast. And that was, I have to thank you for honestly putting a little bit of fire under my behind to start doing this, because this is something I wanted to do for a while. And I got to have on a group of incredible guests kind of in succession, one of whom being Michael from Higher Up Wellness, who you actually introduced us to, and he's become a great friend of mine. And essentially I had a couple people back to back, and these people were fired up on life, doing exactly what they wanted to be doing, making money while doing it, at varying levels of not only like success, fame, whatever it is. I mean, starting from, for example, Zach, who was a fraternity president alongside me during my school time, and he has his own thing going on that he's just getting off the ground floor, all the way to Chris Klaus, who ended up selling a company called ISS to IBM for $1.6 billion, right? And so I had
Golly.
everything under the sun, and all of these people, but the common theme was that they wake up in the morning and they're doing something that they absolutely want to be doing, and chasing that passion. And just kind of, I'm not a woo woo type person, but I think that sometimes the universe can wink. And I got a phone call from essentially my childhood Arabic tutor. Right. So this whole story is crazy, actually. And so I'll tell it briefly. He tells it far better than I do. But there was a 12-year-old Lebanese kid who was growing up in Santa Barbara, and ended up moving to Albuquerque, New Mexico, because his mom was a nuclear engineer, and nuclear engineering is huge in Albuquerque. He hears about YouTube from a friend and gets his first webcam. He decides to start making how to learn Arabic videos on YouTube. And this is pre-Google YouTube. This is like 2007. They actually get like 70,000 views. So it's a lot of views for pre-Google YouTube
Wow.
time. Another Lebanese man in Albuquerque, New Mexico, recognizes the kid from the How to Learn Arabic YouTube videos and says, "Hey, are you the kid from the YouTube videos?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "My wife is American. I have two twin boys. Can you tutor them in Arabic?" So he says, "I would love to. Every Sunday, my twin brother and I go to learn Arabic from this 12-year-old kid. We're 7 at the time." And he wouldn't let him, his parents wouldn't let my parents pay, because they were like, "Oh, he needs to focus on his studies." So my dad, in return, got him an internship at the electrical and computer engineering department at UNM. That kicked off his entire life of becoming a software engineer and starting multiple companies, blah, blah, blah. I get a phone call from him this previous Thanksgiving. And this is after all my conversations with these people who I essentially said it was planting seeds in my brain. And essentially, I recall the way he said, "Now that I know that there's blood in the water, when you get back to San Francisco, come, let's co-work," and blah, blah, blah. I got back, started the interview process almost immediately. My mind was already made up by that point. 2 weeks later, I told my job at my former employer at that point, "Hey, I'm leaving." And actually, they were ecstatic for me. So many times people will go from, they'll job hop laterally and up, which is everyone's own prerogative. But they were like, "No, this is so cool that you're actually taking a risk. This is what I should have done in my early 20s." And I joined the team as the 4th employee, and we work out of my CEO Natter's living room. It's literally a living room that's converted into like kind of an office, and so I'm having so much fun. I've been there now for 6 weeks, so we could still be in a little bit of a honeymoon period, but working super hard. The company's called brev.dev, for those who want to look it up, but that's a little bit about the story. So you'll notice in that story, I didn't really mention money at all. And I can sort of, I'll just throw it back to you, but that was not a driving force in this decision.
Yeah, I bet. First off, what a story. I mean, it's so cool. The lesson there is you never know what kind of connections can come back around. So I love that. So how about you start by telling us, what were you leaving? Like, what did you just leave from your current job financially, and, benefits, all that stuff?
Oh yeah, no. So I mean, as with big tech jobs they're cushy, right? They're meant to make you feel as comfortable as possible, which meant that yeah, obviously the salary was high. I had ended up getting promoted about a year into my position, so I was making $171,000 base, and then there's options on top of that, and then there's bonuses on top of that. And at 24 years old, that's a stupid amount of money. And additionally, free food in the office, and again, they try to make it as comfortable as possible. What was I leaving? I think that my sort of dissonance with myself was realizing that, especially after I got the promotion, and this is something that I've talked about recently, I didn't want the prize at the end of the game I was playing,
Mm.
because what could I look for next, right? Was it the next promotion? Okay, I was already making enough money that like another 50 grand wouldn't drastically change my quality of life. It just wouldn't. And so okay, so then am I waiting to become a manager, which is now after the next promotion? Okay, I don't really want my manager's job. And then, so do I need to move companies? And I'm asking myself these questions. If I don't want the prize, then I have to change the game. And that's ultimately why I decided when this new opportunity came up at Brev that the prize seemed a lot more enticing to me. And even if that meant that the money was lower, right? I'm someone who lived well below my means before. I continue to do so. And so I'm happy and proud to say that I didn't cut back on any of my expenses, right? My rent, I still eat out, I still have fun. And that's because I lived below my means, so that even with this lower salary, which by the way, I still live comfortably, I'm not making, super peasant's wage. I don't share it because of fundraising stuff with the startup. Just generally don't want to be throwing that out there. But yeah, the point being, I have always I didn't succumb to lifestyle creep, so I didn't feel shackled to my salary.
Yeah, that was one of the first things outside of software engineering that I saw you post about. I feel like that almost like helps you blow up, like some of the
Oh, for
budgeting
sure.
and living below your means, and taking us back to the early days, which is what, less than a year ago. um, Pretty crazy to think about. Um, have you heard of the term golden handcuffs?
Oh yeah.
I feel like you're mentioning that these organizations, big tech, and no fault to them, I do the same, but they try to make you as comfortable as possible. And so it's like those golden handcuffs, right?
Yeah, I absolutely. And I think that especially I was even in the position to where I had to consciously say, if I was making more money, right, than I was, let's say it was, 250,000 or more, 300,000, right? There gets to be a point to where walking away does feel like the really, really stupid decision. For some, they might look at what I did and it looks like a stupid decision. But obviously, the more, and so what they'll do is they'll even tie it up in like stocks that are like vesting on a schedule. So it's like, yeah, you're making this much, but if you just stay for another 18 months, you'll make like double, right? And
Yeah.
that's how they keep you around. And I think that I had to consciously say, okay, then maybe after the next promotion, walking away from this will even be more painful. And so that was another sort of impulse for my decision.
Mhm. So you mentioned moving laterally and up. That's rather common. You may get a bit of a pay raise. What is that something that you see a lot? Is that the path that a lot of people take?
So that's why when I first decided, or like when I had my meeting with my manager, he sort of like sighed and was ready for like a upsetting meeting, because what happens is you work there, do your time, which in today's society is literally 12 to 18 months. I think the average tenure of a software engineer is like 18 months. And then you say, oh, I'm going for the bigger, better company at the next level. And then you just ping pong throughout your career. Even the talented engineers, that's what they do. And so, I'm not saying that you should have complete loyalty to your company, but I would say that treating that as the game of just this is what I want to do for my career is definitely what most people think is like the route, because it is probably, I think there's a lot of science to show that it is the quickest way to improve your compensation, and I think that is the game that a lot of people are optimizing for.
Yeah, absolutely. I did have somebody on here though that stayed at an organization for 10 years, and obviously it just depends on your situation. But one of the things that they said is the grass is always greener on the other side. That's what everyone says, but it's only really greener where you're watering it. And so he stayed at his organization for 10 years, and while he could have job hopped and eventually, made more and made more and made more, what ended up happening is got like this massive promotion into like the executive level, which probably would have never happened if you job hop all around.
100%. I mean, even if you look at this is anecdotes, but the CEO of Google, the CEO of Apple, right, Tim Cook, these people came from internally and just have been working there for literally decades.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and another thing, and then we'll get into your new job. But you mentioned that a few people at your organization said something along the lines of, "I kind of wish I would have done that in my 20s." Is that true?
Yeah, yeah. I think that especially as a software engineer, the dream really is, oh, I'm gonna be the next, Mark Zuckerberg or whatever. I'm gonna build a startup and turn it into a really big thing. I don't know if that's necessarily my goal, but truth to them, I don't fault them. A lot of these of my coworkers were on H-1B visas, so they're coming from places like India or China, and you need to have employment, and so you don't really have that luxury because you have to have somebody sponsoring you to stay in the country. And so when they were in their early 20s, they have to get out of college and go find a job immediately. And then they're even more shackled to their jobs. Talk about golden handcuffs. Those are just straight up handcuffs. Like, you get laid off, you have 90 days that starts ticking before you're literally out of the country. And so so when I told them that that's what I was doing, I'm not, going to the even fancier job. They're like, wow, that's awesome. Like, I can't wait to follow along your journey, which felt really like good because, whenever you leave a job, it can feel, you don't want there to be bad blood. And, if anything, I think that, I got to kind of also open up about my social media. I had been kind of like closed off about a lot of that stuff. And so I like told my manager about it, and he said, wow, like, I really like what you're putting out there. If there's anything like I can do to help you in the future, let me know. And I'm like, that feels amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, if I was them, I would look at you and say, I can't blame the guy. And, if he was moving laterally and up, it's like, okay, come on, chasing the money. I kind of get it. But for them, I'm not surprised that they're really rooting for you. So now let's get into it. Brev.dev, taking a big pay cut, not having the benefits and the stock options and everything. Let's get into why. Like, why would you make this move? And the reason why is because on this podcast, I'm now talking about these F's: faith, family, fitness, fellowship, future. I know you can talk about a lot of those. A lot of this will probably fall into if I were to guess based on what I've heard you share, is definitely the future option, obviously, but even maybe the fellowship one too, because I feel like some of the people you're working with are you're super tight with, which I don't want to steal that for you, but like, why did you make this move?
Yeah, I think that if I were to describe the difference of a day to day between my previous job and my current job, which I didn't know ahead of time, but I had a pretty good idea, and I think I hit the nail on the head, is the previous job, I again, no fault to my coworkers, but they were just in a different stage of life than me. They were in their 30s. Most of them had kids. They lived in South Bay, so they lived kind of far away, closer to the office. And I didn't socialize with them. Work was work. It was very clinical. Sometimes we would try to have fun, and it would be kind of awkward. You try and do a Zoom lunch or whatever, and nobody wants to speak, and so you try and break the silence. Just not the best. And I'm someone who's hyper social, obviously, so I'm very extroverted. I like to have fun, and additionally, it's a big organization. Things move a bit slower. If I wanted to work 10 times as hard as I was previously working at my previous company, I wouldn't have 10 times the output. Corporates, when it gets that big, it's literally designed to move somewhat slowly, even if they tell you they want to move quickly, because there's a lot of bureaucracy. That's just part of the game. Now at my new job, right? I mentioned I was the fourth employee. We were joking around at 9 a.m. and having a good time, and we go out to lunch together, and it's the entire company, and we're talking about some work, some fun, some personal life. We come back, we keep working. Some days we work late, some days we stop early, and it's a lot more flexible, and the work is a lot more interesting. It's just I'm more excited to actually sit down and work on it. And something that can't be ignored is I have equity, right? So I have a piece of the company, and unlike at my previous company, if the ship is going in the right direction, I make a little bit more money, and I can't do anything if it's in the wrong direction. I cannot do anything to steer that ship. It's 1,000-person ship. I can't do anything. However, at this company, it's like what I put in and how we are all, if we're all aligned, we'll be cruising. And if we all succeed, then we all really succeed. And so I'm a lot more tied to the fruits of the success of the company. And that honestly, it would be stupid to say it's like your baby. You're going to be a lot more invested in your child and in their success. And so that's how I feel as well.
So anything that you post is going to get a bunch of different comments on it, a lot of comments. And some of it is encouraging, some of it is straight hate, and you're used to it at this point. But curious, as you've been talking about this shift, what have some of the comments been like? And I'm specifically interested in like our generation, some of the younger folks. Do you feel like people are like, oh, wow, that was a good move? Or are people like, why in the world would you leave that much money? I'm trying to make half that.
Yeah. So I see a couple different versions. I definitely see the one you just mentioned, which is like, this is a stupid decision. What are you doing? And I get it, especially considering money is, what do they say? Like, money doesn't solve all your problems, but not having money is a problem, or something like that. I don't know the exact phrase. But essentially, like, if you're someone who is not financially stable, then I can see how your view of the world would be like, this is stupid. And I get it, right? That's totally valid. The other one that's kind of interesting is that people call me a hypocrite because I'm someone who does kind of oftentimes talk about the more stable routes. And I'm still very bullish on the stable routes. I still think university is great for a lot of people. And so when people see me leaving to go to the startup, they're like, you're doing the risky thing that you tell us not to do. And my sort of retort to that is, it's a calculated risk, right? I didn't throw everything into this basket to where if Brev tanks tomorrow, I'm on the street, right? I have a massive emergency fund that I can last for so long. I kept all my relationships alive at my previous company. They would hire me back tomorrow. And I have all of these fallbacks in place. And that doesn't mean that I think that it's going to not succeed. And a lot of people think that, you have to burn the ships, right? You have to give yourself no way back. Otherwise, it won't succeed. I personally don't believe that. I think that you'll actually become a lot more rash in your decisions if you are basically always fighting for your life. Then you're going to make decisions a bit, you don't have the breath for air to actually make a coherent decision a lot of the times. That's just my personal opinion. But and so those comments are funny. And then the third one is just, how can I join? How can I invest? How can I hire me now? And the amount of interest in Brev and people joining Brev has been so heartwarming, almost exhilarating as well, but it also can be a little over the top sometimes. People will send me their resume like every day, and I'm like, this is a little much, guys.
Yeah, I believe it. Well, you've also, you should, at least if you haven't already on LinkedIn, put your title as like Chief Marketing Officer. As soon as you joined there, I was like, man, this could be great marketing.
Oh, I would be lying if I didn't say that my distribution channels were probably a reason of my joining.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, absolutely. Okay, so time to transition. I have a lot of thoughts. We could talk about this for a while, but one thing I want to do in the last couple of minutes that we have is some like rapid fire questions, or really, I'm just going to give you the title of some of your posts that I've seen recently. And the idea that I got from this was a Chris Williamson Modern Wisdom podcast where he had Alex Hormozy on. So what we're about to do is, you with the hair and being jacked, you can be Alex Hormozy. I'm not going to try to compare myself to Chris Williamson. My accent
You're
is
not
not
going to do
nearly
a
as
British
good as
accent?
no, I can't do that. Maybe one day. But why don't we start here? This is a good one, and this video kind of blew up for you recently. You're being manipulated. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that young men particularly, I know that Chris Williamson actually does talk to this cohort fairly frequently. I'm someone who's passionate about it because I was 14, 15, and arguably watching what would be called the modern day version of the red pill manosphere type content. And I got out of it, right? My life ended up going a different way. I'm so glad that it did. And I think that now from the Mountain View vantage point, I look down and I see these kids falling into a lot of the same traps that I arguably did. And so it's easy for me to tell when somebody is just telling these kids what they want to hear and what they the easiest sort of thing that'll land on their ears to, in my opinion, get a paycheck. And so I wanted to illustrate exactly how that happens. And I think a lot of the times, if you're just like, I start with a inflammatory statement, you're being manipulated. But then for the next 90 seconds, I go on to explain, doesn't this kind of make sense? Like, listen to what I'm saying and see if you are going to have a different perspective at the end of this video, which ultimately is my goal. And I did get a lot of comments saying like, I needed to hear this. Like, wow, thank you so much. Of course, there's a couple people with hate with every time, but I get some really nice emails from people who will basically be like, this, you don't always tell me what I want to hear, but you tell me what I need to hear. And those always feel the best.
What are some of the things that you see out there that are manipulating these young men?
I think the biggest one is just that when you're a young male, you think that I want a love, right? I want a girlfriend, or sometimes they'll tell you you want multiple girlfriends, but I want to be sought after. And I think a lot of people, I don't know if they want the girlfriend because they actually want the girlfriend, or they want the girlfriend for the social validation that it'll get them from other men. I'm not sure. But the point being, it comes down to, I want a hot girlfriend. And then they say, okay, they know that young men today it's incredibly stark how quickly they're falling behind, right? The number of like dateless, sexless men before 30 is like, it's like going straight up. And so clearly there's a problem there. There is a problem. But the solution they sell is one that is, hey, listen to me, don't listen to anybody else, and buy my course, is essentially what it is, right? This is how you're going to, the reason why you can't find a girlfriend is because you're, not rich, and I'll teach you how to be rich, right? When in reality, right, it would probably be something like, hey, you need to work on yourself. You need to have good hygiene. You need to be ambitious. You need to treat them like they're human beings and not like they're just objects of your sexual desire, and all of these other things that are more nuanced and takes more time. But when you can put a list of check boxes and say, you need these 5 check boxes for $100 a month, I will show you how to get each checkbox, then you'll be lovable. It can seem very intuitive. And that's why I think a lot of men will, fall for it. And I don't blame them. Again, I was there 14, 15 years old.
Yeah, they don't know any different. And the problem is this kind of stuff wasn't around 5, 10, 15 years ago. And so their parents don't even know what's going on. And so then when a kid has an opportunity to go to college, their parents are even willing to pay for it. They would even get a scholarship and they don't go. It's because they're being manipulated. And I've seen it happen so many times, and it's really frustrating. Not that college has to be the route. I'm not saying that's the case, but I think a lot of times it's, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur, like do this thing or that thing. And a lot of times, like the route is the work. And I think a lot of people are just trying to avoid the work because we're lazy and we're looking for easy buttons. I think you and I could get pretty fired up about this one.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful explanation. I actually haven't even distilled it as beautifully if you just did, which is that whether college is the route or whether entrepreneurship is the route, right? The real route is the work, right? And so it's like that is unavoidable. There's no way to get around that. And so if you think that success not going through college will be easier, you're absolutely wrong. If anything, it's going to be harder. It might be more lucrative, but it's going to be harder.
Yeah. What about this one? You aren't special.
This is close to what we were just discussing. Yeah. I think one of my favorite quotes of all time is, don't get upset at the results you didn't get for the work you didn't do. And I think that so many people, especially my generation, I don't know if it's social media blasted since we were a young age. Oh, look at all these rich and famous people and their great, great lives. And so you're like, oh, that's how my life is going to be when I'm 25. That's how my life's going to be when I'm 30. That's how my life's going to be. And if you do nothing to do the things that actually make you special, then you're going to be average. And so I say there's nothing wrong with being average, right? In fact, before social media, I think most people were probably completely content with living an average life, because an average life can actually be very fulfilling. You have a family that you care about, a job that cares about you and you care about it. You have your community that you devote yourself to, right? That's a very fulfilling life. But now people think that they need, private jets and whatever. But so let's say now the expectation is private jets and retiring by 30. If you do nothing to actually get that, that's a top 1% or top 0.1% outcome, right? If you're not putting in the top 0.1% work, like we were just discussing, there's going to be a gap between what you think you should have and what you actually get. And so I'm not saying that people aren't special, as in that everyone, is destined to live a life that they don't want. But what I said is there's nothing wrong with being average. There is something wrong with being average, wanting to be special, not doing anything to be special, and then getting mad you don't live a special life.
So if you didn't get into fitness 8 years ago, however many years ago, what about your life do you think would be different right now if you never got into it?
Wow, that's a great question. I think about this a lot, actually. I don't know if I ever would have gone down the path of becoming more confident and more self-assured. I would like to think that I would, but truthfully, what the gym allowed me to do, because I had played every sport under the sun, what the gym allowed me to do was teach myself that I could commit to something long-term over the course of years, without expecting any reward in return, which I think is incredibly important. And that translated itself into so many facets of my life that and just feeling better in the mirror and feeling more confident. That was obviously great too. But the only thing I really had going for me, I mean, prior to the gym, was school. Like, I was a good student. I've always been a good student, but that's because I probably honestly tied myself to the grades a little bit. And, the vanity existed there. It just existed in a number on a scorecard. And I think that if I had never gone to the gym, I probably would be laissez-faire about life, not as driven, not as, or maybe just I would be driven but insecure about my ability to commit and to execute. And the gym really did teach me that, and I have to thank everyone along the way for that transformation, because at the beginning I get how hard the first 6 months or a year are, because it's so new to you. You feel like you don't know anything. There is so much garbage in the space, and I think that I was given arguably the best little environment for me to develop that and move past all the really tough, steep learning curves. And ever since, it's been the single best decision I've ever made in my life was getting consistent in the gym.
I couldn't agree with you. It's been a huge benefit for me as well. I've been on this kick lately where I've been saying, if you look at someone that's in really good shape, super jacked, if you look at one of their posts, there's going to be two comments, like two types of comments at the top. Number one will likely be a steroid accusation, which at some level might be accurate sometimes, but I think a lot of times people comment that because they want to give themselves an excuse to not do the hard work that person did. The other, which I've heard you talk about, and you're going to laugh when I say this, is, what's your workout routine? What supplements do you take? But what do you answer to those people when they comment that?
Yeah, honestly, I'm gonna have to borrow from Michael, Higher Up Wellness, a great friend of the show and friend of mine. Um, he says that you have no business taking a pill or powder until you have the big rocks in place, and I completely agree that and I even will extend like the workout routine. Right, what I say is there is no magic workout routine, and the big rocks are going to the gym consistently over the course, and in my case, years and years and years, right? I have literally done thousands, if I did the math, probably like 7 to 8 thousand workouts at this point, right? And so that's the secret, right? That is the magic sauce. And so people think that when they, and I get it, right? That's the whole thing. Like, you look at somebody and you think, it's the same thing as the billionaire morning routine, right? That's how I treat it, where it's like, oh, Warren Buffett, does this in the morning. If I do that, I'll become a billionaire, because it's the easiest thing you can latch onto and grab onto and be like, I can implement this today, and therefore I'll see the results, right? When in reality, you very well might. The results will be far out in the future, and oftentimes won't even be given to you, because that's not the thing you're actually that's not the thing that's going to give you the results. And so my answer to people who say like, oh, what's your workout routine, because truthfully, and this is where I actually had a bit of a back and forth on this one. Somebody asked, what's your workout routine? I said, I don't have one. And they said, well, what resources do you use to build your workouts? I said, my brain. And the guy said, L answer, right? L answer. And I said, would you rather me lie and pull resources, out of my behind, that is like, and just lie to you? And he said yes. And then I was like, okay. So I don't know if that point he's just following along with it, but these people are basically, in the face of me telling them the secret, they're like, no, I wanted you to sell me a PDF, is basically what he was telling me.
Yeah, I wanted you to sell me a PDF that I'll probably buy and then not even implement.
Yep.
And if you Google a workout program online, now I won't say 100% of them, but most of them, if you actually stick to it, you're going to see results. Now,
100%.
I know our dear friend Michael can really teach you how to be optimal with your workouts. So they might not always be like as optimal, but the thing is you don't need to be worrying about what's optimal if you haven't even started yet. Like 95% of it is just getting started. Then you can worry about the optimal workout and supplements and everything like that. So
Couldn't
we can talk
agree
about that
more,
one for a
Hampton.
long time. Well, I say that we have to keep these at 30 minutes, and I promise we're about to wrap up. I got to ask you one more thing, because this is a fun subject to talk about. Thoughts on sports betting?
Yeah, I made a video on this. It was actually during the Super Bowl that I went out to go film this, because I knew how many sort of sports betting websites were about to advertise during the Super Bowl. And sure enough, I was right. And so I went out and recorded it. I think that young men have a hubris to them, right? We think that we're invincible. We think that we're the smartest people on the earth. And I don't know if it's all the testosterone flowing through our veins. I don't know what it is. And I saw a stat that essentially the 25 to 35 basically year old men is now the largest cohort of gamblers, right? And that's because of sports betting. That's because of these apps. A couple of years ago, the Supreme Court basically legalized sports gambling in a lot of different states. And that's why you've seen the rise of things like DraftKings and Prize Picks and blah, blah, blah. And there's a lot of science to show that variable dopamine hit that you get from a sports bet or just gambling in general is as addictive as hard drugs. Like it
Wow.
literally hijacks your brain. And we are, whether we like to admit it or not, are at the mercy of our own biology. And if you think about like what Instagram is doing to like 13-year-old girls' self-esteem, it's that level of hijacking your brain when you're talking about like sports betting. And so my opinion, right? I was like, does it make watching the game more fun? Absolutely, right? And I can't tell anybody what to do. But what I said is like, treat it with the reverence that this deserves. This is not a, oh, haha, I just do this because everyone says, oh, I just do it on the weekends, or oh, it's a lock. And of course, all the comments on that video were hilarious. They were all jokes, but it's like, bro's parlay didn't hit. Like, if I listened to you, I wouldn't have made $3,500. All the things like that. But I mean, I personally have a family member who threw their entire life away, and this guy was a doctor, right? Was a doctor. Some people are like alcoholics, can have a couple drinks and be fine. Some people just get hooked, and he, lost his wife, lost his car, all of his cars, lost his house, his relationship to family completely disintegrated, and it's not. You might think that you're strong, but that's like saying I could do a little bit of heroin and be fine, right? I wouldn't get addicted, right? It hijacks your brain in a way that is so unfair to you that it's a David versus Goliath fight that I don't know why you'd place yourself into.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I lied to you. I promise it's going to be super quick, but guys, this is a good one that I'm Backstage just fired up right now. One of the things that you posted recently was the simple answer is often the right one. And I was listening to this podcast recently, and it was actually Huberman's, and he had David Goggins on there, which I thought was hilarious, just because I would say they're two very, very different people. And one of the things that Goggins said, I thought it was pretty interesting, is he was like, you know what you need to do. Like, you know what you need to do. And that made me think about like the simple answer is often the right one. And I don't know if that's exactly what you meant, but I think a lot of times, again, we're looking for this easy button or this like silver bullet. Any thoughts on there to end out the show?
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. Another one of my favorite quotes is that 90% of success can be boiled down to doing the obvious thing for an extraordinary amount of time without convincing yourself that you're smarter than you think you are. And I think that that's great. And that's ultimately what I was trying to distill as well. But hopefully I added some questions that I get often to be like, you really do know what the answer is here. And the reason why you just don't want to execute on it is that you don't like the answer, right? You're waiting, oh, there's got to be something that I don't know, some magic bullet out there that once I get it, my life will be so easy, when it doesn't exist. I think that one of my favorite compliments that I get is that people think that I'm a lot older than I actually am. Because I think that there is a wealth of experience that as you age, you tend to learn a lot of the painful lessons. And oftentimes I feel like I can be a vessel for, parents to their kids or whatever. People will be like, I send all my videos to my college age kid because they won't listen to me. And that's one of them. Absolutely. That there is no substitute for just doing the work. And you probably know what the answer is. Like, you want to get a better grade on your exam. It's like, okay, your study habits are probably messed up, and you know that. And you're on your phone or you're socializing with friends. You already know that. You want to get better at coding. You got to start coding. You want to get better you want to change your body. You have to get in the gym and just work out in the gym. You know these things, and yet you're waiting for me to say, well, this little pill will actually do everything. It's going to make you smarter and run faster, and that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well, another fun fact is, Baxate, if you wanted to, you could sell a pill or something and probably make a lot of money, but that would be very short-term minded, and you would lose a lot of respect from people like me. But in the long run, when you are the next Mark Zuckerberg, it'll be worth it to not be selling a pill or a course in the short term.
Oh, yeah, that's what I get. So many people telling me that I don't know if it's like a new version of the whole, side hustle scheme, but I get probably 5 DMs a day saying, hey, let's make you a community. And monetize your audience or whatever. I'll do everything, right? And it's like, so I'm not even involved. Just a straight cash grab. And there are people with great communities who provide value. I know that Michael has one that's great, but that's all him, right? And yet, so yeah, I would never try and monetize my audience in a way where I did not feel that I was providing more value than they were actually willing to part the dollars with for me.
Mm. Well, speaking of Michael, he said this the first time I had him on. I had him on again, and he said a lot of people are asleep at the wheel of their own life. And I think that that's who you're speaking to. And really, that's the purpose of this podcast. It is time for us to wake up. We got to wake up and lead ourselves. So, you know how I want to end this. It's time for you and me
To wake up and lead.